Chosen one, if you are listening to this message now, understand something clearly. This is not chance, it is not coincidence, and it is not just one more piece of content. There are moments when God interrupts the normal flow of life to get our attention, and this is one of those moments. He redirected your thoughts, paused your routine, and led you here because there is something that needs to be dealt with before you move forward. Something that cannot go with you into the next phase of your life without causing damage to your purpose. When God speaks firmly, it is not to destroy, but to protect. There is a deep difference between condemnation and correction, and many confuse the two. Condemnation distances, accuses, and paralyzes. Correction draws near, warns, and realigns. And what you are receiving now is correction wrapped in mercy. It is God saying that something has crossed an invisible boundary, a spiritual boundary that, if ignored, could compromise everything He has been building inside you. Perhaps you have allowed thoughts that were not born in God. Perhaps you have fed habits, connections, or attitudes that seem small, but that gradually began to distort your vision, your identity, and your peace. Even if no one else noticed, heaven noticed. Not to expose you, but to prevent you from getting hurt further ahead. God's intervention is always a sign of active love, not of rejection. If this message weighs on your spirit, it is because it is still sensitive to the voice of God. This is precious. God does not correct those He has abandoned. He corrects those He intends to take further. The fact that you are here now is proof that your destiny matters too much to be treated with silence. Something is being adjusted, something is being interrupted, and something new is being prepared within you. Chosen one, there is a kind of moment that does not happen often in spiritual life. It is not when God whispers softly, nor when He just watches from a distance. It is when He intervenes, when He interrupts, when He decides to stop everything to protect something that is at risk. If you are listening to this message now, it is because you have entered exactly this moment. God decided to confront something before it crosses a point of no return. This intervention does not come loaded with wrath, but with urgency. It is the kind of correction that happens when heaven sees something silently forming inside you. Something that, if not dealt with now, can compromise everything He has planned. God does not act late. He acts at the exact limit between mercy and protection. When He says, "This is very wrong on your part," He is not raising His voice to scare you, but to wake you up. Many times, what God confronts is not something visible to others. It is not a public scandal, nor an evident mistake. They are internal permissions, repeated thoughts, silent agreements with guilt, with fear, with doubt, or with old patterns you believed you had already overcome. The danger is not only in what you do, but in what you begin to accept as normal inside your mind and your heart. God sees beyond the present moment. He sees the accumulated effect of small concessions. He sees where a certain thought will lead you if it continues to be fed. He sees how an apparently harmless habit can turn into a spiritual blockage further ahead. And because He loves you, He decides to stop you now, before it becomes too costly. This correction does not mean rejection. On the contrary, it means investment. God does not confront what He has abandoned. He confronts what He has decided to preserve. If heaven is moving with this intensity in your direction, it is because there is something in you that needs to be protected. Something that has not yet fully manifested, but that is already being threatened at the spiritual level. Perhaps you have felt a strange weight when hearing these words. It is not fear, it is conviction. Conviction is the proof that your spirit still recognizes the voice of God. Condemnation pushes away, correction pulls closer. God is not moving you away from your purpose. He is preventing you from moving away from it. There are moments when God's love manifests as an embrace. and there are moments when it manifests as a blockage. One is not greater than the other. Both save. If he is blocking something now, it is because allowing you to continue would be more cruel than interrupting. God prefers to deal with the momentary discomfort of correction than with the deep pain of future destruction. This is an intervention of active love, a love that does not watch you fall in silence, a love that steps into the way, closes doors, confronts choices, and exposes inner lies before they become identity. God is saying, "Stop now, because I see what you do not see yet." And if he is confronting you, it is because there is still much to be lived, built, and revealed in you. This is not a final stop. It is a route adjustment, and adjustments only happen when the destination still matters. Chosen one, God's correction never points only to the mistake. It points mainly to the value of what is being protected. When God decides to intervene firmly, it is because what is at stake is too great to be treated lightly. Heaven does not go into urgency over small things. It goes into urgency when destiny is involved. You may even have interpreted this correction as something too harsh. But understand, God does not correct to humiliate. He corrects to align. He does not confront to reduce you, but to prevent you from reducing yourself. There is a level of calling, identity, and purpose over you that does not match certain choices, thoughts, or patterns you began to tolerate. Perhaps you have gotten used to seeing yourself as smaller than you really are. Perhaps you have begun to accept versions of yourself that were born from pain, from weariness, or from survival, but not from truth. God is confronting exactly this. Not because he is disappointed, but because he recognizes in you something you began to forget. There is a difference between who you became to survive and who you were created to be. God's correction is the invitation to abandon the wounded version and return to the original identity. He is not dealing with your isolated mistakes, but with the direction your mind began to follow. Because God knows that accepted thoughts become beliefs, beliefs shape choices, and choices build destinies. You were not created to carry guilt. He has already forgiven. You were not created to shrink yourself to fit into places that were never yours. You were not created to live in constant doubt about who you are. Every time you accept a lie about yourself, something within your calling is silenced. And God is saying that this needs to stop now. This correction is, in fact, a restoration of identity. It is God saying, "Stop treating yourself as someone I did not create. You have demanded too much from yourself in some areas, and allowed yourself less than you should in others. You have carried weights that are not yours and abandoned truths that should sustain you." Heaven is realigning this now. God sees what is trying to form inside you, even in the midst of weariness. He sees strength where you see exhaustion. He sees perseverance where you see failure. He sees future where you began to see only limitations. And it is precisely for this reason that he corrects, to prevent your distorted vision from destroying what he has already declared. Correction is not the end of something good. It is the end of what was preventing the best. God is not delaying you. He is preparing you to carry something greater without breaking in the process. Heaven is not silent. It is working with precision. If God is being firm with you now, it is because he refuses to allow you to enter the next chapter misaligned. He does not want to just take you forward. He wants to take you whole, healed, aware, aligned. This correction is the proof that your destiny is still alive. Your calling is still standing, and your story is still being written with divine intention. Chosen one, God is not just dealing with external behaviors. The correction you are feeling now goes much deeper. It touches the place where the most decisive battles happen, the mind. Because before anything becomes disorganized on the outside, something begins to be distorted on the inside. Thoughts accepted in silence end up shaping emotions, decisions, and over time, identity itself. You may not have realized it, but you have been allowing certain thoughts to repeat themselves without resistance. Ideas of discouragement, of insufficiency, of delay, of loneliness. Thoughts that began small, almost harmless, but that gradually began to influence how you see yourself and how you interpret your own life. God saw this forming before it became a stronghold inside you. The enemy always tries to act first in the mind because he knows that if he can change the way you think, he will be able to change the direction you take. That is why God is intervening now. Not because you have already fallen, but because you are approaching a place where your vision would begin to contradict your destiny. Heaven intervenes when the mentality begins to come into conflict with purpose. You began to question whether you were still chosen. You began to think that your mistakes had annulled your calling. You began to believe that perhaps you were alone, forgotten, or spiritually distant. These thoughts were not just momentary reflections. They were seeds. And God, in His mercy, decided to pull them out before they created deep roots. When God says, "This is very wrong on your part," He is saying, "Stop accepting thoughts that I never wrote about you." You were agreeing with narratives that were born from weariness, from pain, and from frustration, but not from truth. An agreement is spiritual alignment. That with which you agree begins to influence who you become. God is breaking these agreements now. He is undoing silent alliances with guilt, with fear, and with self-sabotage. This is not just a superficial correction. It is a deep intervention, a spiritual surgery. God is entering the innermost places of your mind to restore what has been distorted over time. The transformation He is beginning does not start with external changes. It starts with the renewing of the mind, because healed thoughts generate healed choices. Healed choices generate healed paths. God is not just trying to change what you do. He is changing how you think about yourself, about Him, and about your future. This correction is God returning clarity where there was confusion, hope where there was weariness, truth where there was a lie. You are not being confronted because you have failed too much, but because you were believing too little in who God says you are. And that needed to be interrupted now. Chosen one, everything that God is correcting in you points to a single objective: to restore your identity, not the identity that was shaped by pain, rejection, or survival, but the original identity, the one He thought of even before you existed. God is not dealing with who you became in the difficult moments. He is calling back who you have always been in the eyes of heaven. You were not created to live diminished, insecure, or carrying guilt that has already been forgiven. But along the way, wounds began to accumulate, and you started to see yourself through them. You began to treat yourself as someone broken, when God still sees you as someone under construction. And correction comes precisely to align this vision. God is saying, "Stop treating yourself as someone I did not create." You accepted identities that were born from rejection. You embraced labels that arose from fear. You adjusted your life to fit into places that were never compatible with who you are. And all of this began to silently suffocate your purpose. Correction is the moment when God interrupts this process and says, "Enough." Not because you went too far, but because He refuses to let you move forward, carrying distortions that do not belong to your essence. God sees the potential that is still alive inside you, even when you only see weariness. You are about to be content with less than what you were called to live. You are beginning to normalize thoughts that reduced your faith, your courage, and your expectation. God intervened because he knows you cannot enter the next chapter with a misaligned mindset. He wants to take you forward, but whole. This restoration does not happen noisily. It begins from the inside out, with the mind being adjusted, with identity being remembered, with hope being rekindled. Little by little, you begin to realize that what seemed lost is still there, that the flame has not gone out, it was only smothered. God is not shaming you. He is defending what He placed inside you. He is not pointing out flaws. He is protecting the future. Each correction is proof that heaven is still investing, is still involved, and is still committed to your story. This is not the end of anything. It is the beginning of a deep realignment. You are not being punished. You are being rebuilt. God is saying, I love you too much to allow you to live below what I called you to be. And as this identity is restored, something awakens. Strength begins to return. Vision begins to clear. Purpose begins to make sense again. You are not late. You are being prepared. Heaven has not given up on you. On the contrary, it is calling you back home, to the truth, to the identity, and to the purpose that have always been yours. Chosen one, it is important to understand something clearly. The correction God is doing in you is not punishment. Punishment distances, humiliates, and condemns. God's correction protects, preserves, and prepares. If He is being firm now, it is because something precious needs to be guarded. He does not correct to hurt you, but to prevent you from continuing to hurt yourself without realizing it. Many times, the soul interprets correction as rejection because it was taught to associate confrontation with abandonment. But God does not confront to go away. He confronts to remain. His firmness is proof of closeness. He is close enough to see what is hurting you, and loving enough not to ignore it. You may have felt discomfort when realizing what needs to change. This discomfort is not condemnation. It is conviction. Conviction reveals that your heart still responds to truth. A hardened heart does not feel, does not react, does not move. Yours is still spiritually alive, and that is too valuable for God to overlook. God is protecting you from choices that seem small now, but that could become great obstacles later. He is interrupting patterns before they become prisons. He is confronting thoughts before they become identity. He is closing doors before you enter places that would drain your faith, your peace, and your strength. Correction is also a shield against self-sabotage. There are moments when it is not the world that hurts us. It is ourselves. When we believe lies, when we insist on paths that God has already signaled as dangerous. Divine correction is God placing Himself between you and what could destroy you. Nothing He is dealing with now is random. Each adjustment has purpose. Each confrontation has intention. God does not waste spiritual energy. If He is speaking with such clarity, it is because there is something very specific that needs to be realigned so that you may move forward safely. God's correction does not steal your freedom. It restores it. It gives you back awareness, clarity, and direction. And when you understand this, fear gives way to gratitude. You realize that you are not being punished, but cared for. Not being rejected, but guarded. Not being delayed, but prepared. Chosen one, the true transformation that God is working in you does not begin on the outside. It begins inside. Before circumstances change, something needs to be renewed in your mind. Because the mind is the soil where decisions are born, emotions grow, and destinies are built. God knows this, and that is why He is touching exactly there. You carried thoughts that did not come from God for far too long. Thoughts of insufficiency, fear, doubt, guilt, and isolation. They did not arrive all at once. They came little by little, like a persistent whisper. And without realizing it, you began to live under their influence. God is awakening you to this now. This awakening is not accusation. It is liberation. God is showing what needs to be left behind so that something new can be born. He is teaching you to identify thoughts that do not reflect the truth and to stop agreeing with them, because that with which you agree begins to govern your life. Renewing the mind is not denying the pain. It is reinterpreting it in the light of the truth. It is not pretending you did not suffer, but understanding that suffering does not define who you are. God is replacing old narratives with a vision aligned with purpose. He is adjusting the way you see yourself, how you position yourself, and how you wait for the future. This process requires surrender. It requires letting go of thoughts that seemed familiar, even if harmful. It requires trusting that God's truth is safer than the conclusions you drew in moments of weariness. Renewal does not happen all at once, but it begins with conscious decisions. Each time you reject a thought that diminishes you, something is strengthened inside you. Each time you choose truth instead of lies, your identity becomes more aligned. God is rebuilding you from the inside out so that, when the doors open, you are prepared to go through them. This inner awakening is silent, but powerful. It is in it that hope returns, clarity comes back, and faith is reorganized. You are not being forced to change. You are being invited to wake up to who you truly are. Chosen one, everything that God is doing now points to a new chapter. Not a chapter written from pain, but from restoration. He is not closing your story. He is turning the page. And before he does that, he is making sure you do not take into the future what belongs to the past. You are not coming out of this process weak. You are coming out more aware, more aligned, and more firm. What once seemed confusing begins to make sense. What seemed heavy begins to lighten. What seemed lost begins to be found again. This is a sign that correction has fulfilled its role. God does not awaken someone just to confront. He awakens to restore, strengthen, and send. What is being born in you now is spiritual maturity. A faith less naive, more profound. An identity less fragile, more firm. A hope less based on circumstances and more rooted in truth. This new chapter will not be perfect, but it will be aligned. It will not be free of challenges, but it will be sustained. You will no longer walk guided by fear or doubt, but by the awareness of who you are and of who God is with you. The correction that seemed hard at the beginning now reveals its true purpose, to prepare you to carry what is to come. God does not hand over greatness to a misaligned mind. He first adjusts, strengthens, and heals. And that is exactly what he has done here. You are not being left behind. You are being positioned. You are not being diminished. You are being elevated. You are not being discarded. You are being chosen again, now with more clarity. Receive this with gratitude. Do not resist the process. Heaven is in your favor. Your future is not threatened. It is being protected. And what God began in you, He is faithful to complete. This is not the end. It is the restart. A restart with truth, restored identity, and living hope. If you have made it to the end of this message, know that this is also part of the process. Not everyone remains until the end, when God begins to confront, adjust, and realign. Remaining requires humility, openness, and willingness to hear the truth. And that already says a lot about you, and about the spiritual moment you're living right now. Everything that was released here did not have the objective of accusing, hurting, or exposing. On the contrary, this word came to protect, restore, and reposition. God does not speak firmly to push you away, but to prevent you from losing yourself. If something inside you was touched, confronted, or awakened, this is a sign that there is still spiritual sensitivity, there is still active purpose, and there is still a calling being cared for by heaven. Perhaps you do not have all the answers now, and that is okay. Transformation does not always happen in the noise. Many times it begins in the silence of reflection. The important thing is not to ignore what God has shown. Realignment begins when we recognize what needs to be adjusted and allow truth to take the place of old narratives. Now, I want to hear you. Write in the comments what spoke to you the most in this message. It can be a sentence, a specific part, or even a single word that touched your heart. If you felt confronted, restored, or awakened, share it. Your comment may be exactly the sign someone else needs to understand that they are not alone on this journey. This space is not just a channel. It is a meeting point for people who are being awakened, restored, and realigned. When you comment, you take part in this spiritual movement. So write, share what God spoke to you, and stay attentive, because heaven still has much to reveal.